this is the second in our 3-part series, and each of the sessions is broken into 3 chunks of time. So there'll be a topic for about 20 minutes, then there'll be about 10 minutes to chat with your people at your table, then another chunk and some chatting, and then another chunk and some chatting. I'm delighted that Brent Close and Stacy Parsons from Desert Sands Middle School in Ashcroft will be the example for the 3rd part. And because they can't be here in person, they taped their section ahead of time, so there'll be an exciting technology change right near the end, and it will be great. We are focusing, this is the name of our series, and so each time we'll make a connection, and we did send out a little reading ahead of time that you didn't have to read, but that we'll tweet out again after the session. The focus of our first chunk of time is self-regulated learners, yes, or self-regulating learners, which is all about positioning kids as owning their own learning and moving away from the teacher being the regulator and kids having that chance to direct their own learning and their own success. So you might say to me, Leighton, wherever you are around the province and beyond, what is self-regulated learning? Well, Deb Butler, Nancy Perry and I wrote a lovely book summarizing our research. I'm going to just talk us through a few of these key points. The first one is that we're all self-regulating learners, and so it's not a school thing. It's a life thing. And anybody who has a nasty day or a really exciting time watching superhero movies, or maybe just has trouble getting out of bed in the morning, that's a process where you have to self-regulate what you're doing, and it's an ongoing thing where you're figuring out and adjusting. So first thing would be, it's not school-based, it's life-based. It almost sounds like a core competency, everyone, but that's leading to what's coming. Self-regulating learners, they know how to control their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions. And so it's really adjusting what you're doing in terms of, for some of us, you know who you are in the room. You just think about things, and at some point you're like, what were we doing? So you need to self-regulate your mind, your thinking. For some of us, it's actually more around your feelings, right? Things that are stressful. You might think about whatever you're teaching and where the kids are the most stressed. Often, sometimes that might be math, but we're working on that. But we build strategies in to help kids have that positive mindset or that growth mindset in that context. That's helping kids self-regulate their feelings within their learning. And then there's also actions, which is not just doing the same thing over and over, but helping kids change what they're doing, but be in control of that. Maybe the main thing we want to highlight is that self-regulated learning is active, where the kids are making choices and figuring things out. It's not passive, where they're telling them, hey, self-regulate yourself. It's about empowering them and helping them build their capacities. And so, my friends, it's really about kids and youth, in our case, middle years or young adolescents, feeling in control over their learning and taking control over their learning, and then us deliberately supporting them to deliberately self-regulate their actions, their thoughts, their feelings within meaningful things. Really, the heart of middle school philosophy related to self-regulated learning is that you don't do self-regulation as a thing you teach, you build it into what kids are doing. It's always part of figuring things out, making sense of in tasks, but it's not like a curriculum that's separate. It's more that you're building it into what you're doing. We'll look at a couple examples. In fact, here comes, I'm not sure where to look right now. Here comes an example right now. I'm sure that played really well over the waves. Oh, I'm going to give you a task. This is a task that I shared or used with a group at Seton Secondary School in grade 8 a few years back. And this was the task. You will work with a partner to choose and read an article finding important information about viruses. After reading and discussing what you've learned, you will write a 60-second news article to be shared with the class, the rest of the class, to help them choose their next article. Now, what are some things that you would have to self-regulate in that task? What are some things, if you were that grade 8 learner, that 14-year-old, you would have to do what? What would you have to regulate? What do you think? People on the airwaves and in this amazing library, what would you have to regulate? How might you feel when you look at having to do that? Hey, grade 8s, here's what we're doing. How would you feel?
be nervous to find a partner that what if no one wants to be my partner? Or what
Nervous to find a partner who wants to be my partner. That never happens in life. Absolutely, right? You'd have to like work with those feelings. What else would you have to regulate? How about like your thoughts? What would you have to like decide or work with or?
Regulate your opinions.
Your opinions. I have to work with somebody else and I have to share and hear their ideas when I'm always right because I'm always right. So it's working with a partner, right? And having opinions and trying to figure those out. Great. Something else you'd have to regulate?
Motivation and behavior.
Your motivation. What if you don't like viruses? I can't quite understand that. But for some people, they're like, I don't want to talk about viruses. And so you have to say, you have to regulate your motivation and then your behavior. Anybody thinking, wow, what if there's not an article I can read? What if I'm working with a partner and they can do it and I can't? So there's all kinds of things where you're like, I'd rather get out of here. And you have to kind of keep yourself there. You have to be able to say, I can stay, I can do this. Often when I share this with groups of kids or tasks like this, I get, what am I supposed to do? Tasks, really rich tasks, have so many components that helping kids understand it or make sense of it is really important. I will say it was a hoot. But there was a certain amount of coaching, but there's also a certain amount of engagement that happened. Steph, were you in that class the year we did that? That's amazing. Stephanie was a teacher candidate the year we did this with a class, at that class. But a lot of the students were not sure how to make their article the best article when they did their 60-second news article. So there was also about thinking about your audience. What am I making? What's the end product? Because sometimes you get so caught up in the little bits that you don't think about the end task. So you might say, hey, Leighton, or hey, Dr. Schnellert, so what is self-regulated learning? Well, let me give you the 3 key components. One is around metacognition. A self-regulating learner can say, here's my strength and here's my stretch. Here's what I'm good at, or here's what I want to work on. And then they can say, what am I going to do to make an adjustment? You need your own toolbox, if you will, because what Nikki needs is pretty different than what Melissa needs. And so it's not just we all need the same thing. I can't just teach you self-regulation strategies. I want to help you build your own strategy toolbox. The next one is strategic action. I thought that one was coming next. I'm so excited that this one came up next. So strategic action is being able to not just be aware of what you need, but actually doing something about it. So one could say, I know what I need, so I'll do this, or I'm not sure what I need, and so I'll ask somebody for it. But it's really taking action. We're not bad in our classrooms at having kids reflect, but we don't always help kids follow through with their goal to do something about it. Last one, which I thought was the second one, but it turns out to be the third one. Yes, is managing your motivation and your emotions, which is super tricky. I do want to talk just for a second about, so we often talk about you're too excited, you're too stressed out, you're too worried, but there's also under engagement, right? And so think about those times. I saw it today when we were teaching this amazing group of grade 8s today, and I had one 14-year-old who was yawning like no tomorrow. So I just had to help him find a way to engage, because he was a big guy. Like his lunch has already been burned out and he needs another snack. So how do I help him get engaged in a way? And for him, he just needed some Post-its to work with. And so the next slide. So the 3 together are the components of helping kids be self-regulating learners. I have one more version I'd like to share. This comes from Nancy Perry's work. This one here comes from Deb Butler in my work. And it's another way to think of this in the middle years classroom. And you'll see kind of the entire rest of the webcast is building on this idea. So we're always thinking about the classroom space in terms of how does it support learners and learning. That might include things like anchor charts, public criteria, having a choice of space, knowing where the tools are to use. I'm looking at Nikki thinking about math right now. I know where that manipulative is and I can use it right now. Knowing to have a choice of graphic organizer. But all those things that we have in our space that are supportive are really critical. But within a task now, Deb Butler did a study a few years ago. You're welcome. It's going to happen several times. Looking at 100 adolescent learners who struggled with learning, emergent learners. And she found in that study that depending on how you looked at the data, between 82 and 88%, or 82 or 88 kids, because out of 100 it's much easier, misinterpreted the task. And so they misunderstood where to go, and so then they were off for the whole time. So it really reminds us that if we can help kids at the beginning say, what do I need to do here? To turn to a partner and say, what am I supposed to do? To articulate what's happening, to refer back to the learning intentions or the anchor chart, that they can really focus their energy in a way that, especially when you are anxious, worried, stressed, overwhelmed, angry, your feelings overtake it, so you just jump into the task without stopping to say, what do I need to do here? So right now, you could leave the webcast, but don't, and say, if I could just help kids and support them in interpreting their tasks more often, I would have done a significant thing for them to help them be successful. Plus, it would also move you away from repeating the task 62 times in your 42-minute block. No one else? No one else? Yeah, people. Okay. Did you see it? It moved. Deb and I did another study with 40,000 kids in French and English in Quebec and BC, looking at middle years and secondary tasks in the content areas. And many, can I say that gently? Most of the teachers in the study didn't actually have opportunities for kids to do planning within tasks. You went right from here's what we're doing to go do it. And we found that you can't really build a self-regulating learner if they don't have to make choices and think about what you could do. So it can be like, I'm going to use this, I'm going to try that, I'm going to, based on that. So we really want to build in that opportunity. We're pretty good at this one, aren't we? Doing something. But monitoring would be saying, while I'm in the task, how is it going? If you've worked with me lately, and we've just done 2 lesson studies or learning rounds this week and last week here in Victoria, I often stop during the lesson and have the students say to each other, what am I supposed to do now? Or how's it going? Or what else do I need? So being able to insert myself, I was going to say interrupt, insert myself into the learning really helps kids know what to do and where to go. And what's so exciting so far is nothing here has required more prep. It's really just about pausing and supporting kids in the learning to have more ownership so they can interpret, plan, and try something out. I got one last one though. I'm just going to highlight it. Adjusting. I think I mentioned earlier how we're pretty good at giving kids a chance to reflect. But how does that help them adjust what they're doing? How does that help you say, what am I going to do next time? And what's my plan? And so we really want to build in those pieces. So that's a really nice way to think about, no matter what you're teaching, empowering kids to self-regulate their learning more. These are some gentle, doucement, softly en français, some gentle prompts that we can use to engage with kids to help them self-regulate their learning. I think it's one thing, I'm going back for a second, no photos quite yet. No, don't do that. I just got the message. I'm not going back anywhere. Let's stay with this slide. Sorry. I'm a handful for Dave's short read today. Here are some prompts that you can use when working with your students to move away from you telling, which I have to say we unconsciously do a lot of. And in a busy middle years classroom, when you're going around and working with kids, you often end up getting kids going or telling kids what to do instead of asking them a prompt to help them decide what to do. But the challenge is if we prompt them or we get them started or we start writing on their work with them, then they're actually not doing it. We're doing it. So here's some little prompts around interpreting tasks. What's your job here? What is this assignment asking you to do? How will you know if you've done a good job? Helps you think about criteria. These are, as you get going or during planning, how will you approach this task? What have you done that's worked for you before? Why don't you show me what you can try. I noticed you did this. Oh, that's a good one. I noticed you did this. Is that a strategy? So it helps name for kids the things that they do that they often don't realize they're doing. A great parenting strategy. I noticed that you looked up when I walked by, and now I'm going to actually have a conversation with you. Sorry, that's for teenagers, everyone. What are you doing here that you can do again and again? So it helps kids articulate the things that are working for them. And then these are the adjusting ones where I pause during a task, especially if I'm engaged in something that lasts like more than one lesson. How are you doing and how do you know? What are the criteria that you're using to figure this out? Or what can you do differently to solve that problem? This is also really nice if you do the same kind of thing. I love to do problem solving regularly in my math class. And so then the kids get used to those prompts because I ask them every time I do that or in writing. I see my friends are up the aisle along the side. I feel like I'm in church right now, people. Okay, here we go. Okay, I would love to make the link to the core competencies. Thanks to Marna McMillan for this slide, and my apologies to her that I lost an arrow somewhere along the way. I tried to get it back. The core competencies are, in their essence, three things combined. Thinking, social emotional learning, but throughout it all, is self-regulated learning. All of these things are things that you want to be able to set a goal around, make a plan, try something out, and get better at. And that's how we build our capacity as individuals. Last time we talked about identity. Thanks to Kristen Weens for that beautiful representation from last time's session. But if you want to build your identity and your success, then this is the kind of work you want to help kids do, because it's about you and you moving forward, not what are we all doing together. Criteria are important, but personal development and your own identity development trumps that in terms of being able to see that you're good at something and have success. We want every kid leading our classroom saying, here's what I'm good at and here's what I'm working at. If you dug down into the personal awareness and responsibility core competency, you'll see that there's language around self-determination and self-advocacy. Some of us who have a background in special education know that language about helping kids be self-advocates. Some of us with a background in psychology know that whole language around self-actualization. But the cool thing is it all comes together around every kid needs a chance to kind of say, here's where I want to go and here's what I want to work on, but also here's what I need. And so we're building opportunities in for kids to do that work. I got one more. Here it is. Self-regulation. If you look at the description in the core competencies in the curriculum, you'll see that it really talks about taking control and making choices, setting goals. Oh, that looks like that diagram with the spinning things, as well as that connection to the first principles of learning, that learning involves patience and time, and that you don't just get better at a competency, it takes a while to get competent. And so that connection to persevering in difficult situations, you can see the richness. It's not just about behavior and emotional regulation. It's about adjusting to be successful, and behavior and emotion is just part of that. It really moves us away from, we got to get our classroom management, to how do we build our learning community where every kid owns it and we're all sharing in the responsibility of the class. Like we talked a little bit last time. I think we talked emotional literacy charters last time, folks. If you didn't see it, it's in chunk 2 of the first webcast. My colleague, Kelsey Keller, who's in School District 43, has a couple little things that she uses with her class that she does on a weekly basis. I've worked in several classrooms. Prab, one of the teachers I work with in SD 23, does Core Competency Fridays. 20 minutes every Friday where kids get a chance to reflect on their week and say, what's something I did well? What's my evidence? And so here's what Kelsey uses. I chose blank, which is the evidence of the week, to show I have been developing my whichever they've chosen. It shows my communication because I want you to notice. I love that part. Sometimes we get in our minds that kid can't do it versus positioning that kid to tell us, I can do it and here's what I did. But stop measuring them against a generic standard versus against themselves. I'm getting better. And lastly, one thing I would do differently next time is because. It's building in that reflection language that helps them see what they're doing, but it gives them choice and control. And then I've got one more. This is also Kelly's. My good this week was. My ugly this week was. Most of you aren't old enough to know this reference, but Clint Eastwood was involved in it. I developed they circle which one of these skills this week when I struggled with which one when because, and I want you to notice blank. I really encourage you to make your own tools, but it's really nice to have something to adapt and see how we can engage kids in this kind of reflection that is, in this case, not about content, it's about you and developing your capacity as an individual, and that every kid gets a chance to do that. So, friends, when we look at what are self-regulated learning promoting practices, these are they. Providing structure or clarity or expectations is critical. I think sometimes we think kids should just be involved in like open-ended activities all the time. That helps, but you also need to know what the parameters are you're working within. Giving influence, opportunities for kids to make choices and make decisions, having control over the challenge of what we're doing. Nikki was talking about that with our numeracy, our math lesson today around if this is open-ended, you can pick which thing you do. Having a chance to reflect, scaffolding, modeling, supporting, or we call that co-regulating, which is helping kids learn how, where you're saying, here's the thing we're trying, let me model it for you, and let me help you get there. So we build some tools into their toolbox, which is modeling. Thinking about what do kids need within that. There's always some additional supports, but the movement has really been from this kid needs that to we teach it to everybody, and then put additional supports in where needed. And then I think I already talked this last little piece around the classroom management piece. If we stopped using classroom management and started talking about classroom community, where kids are working together, it's about making those practices together and helping ourselves be accountable within them. This is the time, I do believe, where you get to talk to each other about this incredible, slide. Something from there that you're like, that's affirming for me in my practice and my middle years kids, maybe something to grow into around helping kids develop this capacity. Is there something you need to let go of? Hint, hint, wink, wink. Some of the control. And is there a way that this helps you think about nurturing community or inclusion in your classrooms? Have just a wee little conversation with your peeps. You got about 8 minutes to chat. Go.